April 12th. We have a full slate of commissioners. Two are in person, one is on the phone, our administrator, clerk of the board, and at this time I'll call the meeting to order, and if you'd please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, with that, first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from March 29th, 2022. Are there any additions, corrections, or?
Mr. Chairman, I have a request. It doesn't need to interfere with the minutes for today, but going forward, I would ask that the level of detail provided for the commissioner reports be consistent throughout all the commissioners and the county administrator. But as for today's, no objection.
The level of reports of the minutes?
The detail provided in the minutes on those reports.
Okay.
That's not a request for action. It's a request for future adjustment in how those minutes are prepared. And again, no objection to today's.
I think we're looking for clarity on that. Are you specifically talking about your presentation or the presentation of items during the agenda?
I'd refer to the county administrator and staff outside the meeting. I'm just simply pointing out that the level of detail provided in the reports from each of the commissioners is not consistent.
Okay. Commissioner Mullen, do you have any additions, corrections for the minutes?
No corrections.
Okay. So with that, they're approved. We'll move down to office business, and I believe we have one voucher.
We have a fund expenditure, move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $431,449.12 as presented, and note that it has been approved by the county administrator and the auditor.
Second with a note.
There's been a motion and a second for the approval of the fund expenditure in the amount of $431,449.12 with a note. Commissioner Peck.
The note is that the auditor and the members of the auditor staff do not ever approve expenditures. Only this board can do that. It's merely a bit of language, but it's an important distinction, and Commissioner Mullen has always been very good at pointing out that it's been reviewed by, and I think today was just an inadvertent use of a different word. I'm sure he knows this. Thank you.
So there's been a motion and a second.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. There's been a motion and a second for the amount of $431,449.12. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, with that, we'll move down to the consent agenda. We have 6 items on the consent agenda.
Move to approve consent agenda items 1 through 6.
Just doing a final review on these, making sure the items I want to discuss are outside the consent agenda. And it looks like they all are. Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the 6 items on the consent agenda. On item 5, I have concerns, but I think we can wait until we are in the elections boundary discussion with the auditor before I bring up my discussion. So I am going to wait until then. So with that, there's been a motion and a second to approve consent agendas 1 through 6. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, that moves us down to Commissioner and Administrator updates. Keith?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Over the past week, spent a fair amount of time reviewing and preparing items for things that are on today's agenda, so we'll get to those shortly. participated for most of the Wasatch Virtual Assembly yesterday, where they had some presentations and comments regarding broadband efforts across the state and what different counties are doing, and some state and federal funding that is being made available to support broadband initiatives across the state of Washington. Doing some work on our reporting requirements. We have a quarterly report for ARPA due at the end of this month. I anticipate that in next week's board meeting, we will have some further discussion about spending priorities for the county and proposals that have been submitted and budget items that have already been identified. We received a letter from Eric Johnson, who's the executive director at WASAC, regarding local assistance and tribal consistency funds, that the Congress is considering making some adjustments to the allocations that they had already considered. So we're working through that issue. It could have some effect on future financial assistance coming to Franklin County and the tribal communities that we work with. I would just note for the benefit of the commissioners that the annual Washington County Administrators Association annual meeting starts tomorrow in Leavenworth. I anticipate being there through the rest of the week. Certainly will be available by phone and email and so forth, but plan on attending that meeting with my counterparts across the state. So thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Peck.
A little bit lighter week than usual with it being spring break and some committees canceling this week, but did have the Washington Association of Counties meeting that Mr. Johnson's already referenced on broadband. Some good ideas there for rural counties like ours, and the State Department of Commerce, which oversees the cybersecurity function for the state, has hired a new director who has a deep background in rural background in broadband. Much of it, it sounds like, in the state of Alaska, where distances and low-density populations are common, and I think that really is a good move and probably does a lot to further the opportunities for broadband in Franklin County. Greater Columbia Behavioral Health was on Thursday. Benton Franklin Council of Governments meeting for this Friday has been canceled, but I did have two staff-level meetings this week with Council of Governments. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullen.
Yes, had a board meeting with Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, and also had planning and with Ben Franklin Transit. One of the things that's happening there is we're looking for a remedy to the collection of fares. The system we have now is seems to be a little antiquated. The rate for collection of fares were given up. Apparently, over 40% of the fares are going for the collection cost. So they're looking at either trying to keep the system we have going now or updating to a new program. And then the third option was not charging for fares. But, I believe that we're probably, I think we're going to look at going with a new system. I'm not sure yet what exactly is going to transpire, but the free fare, I think, is being discouraged. But also with that is upcoming is the Move Forward Washington program that is going to fund their grants that are coming from the state for transportation. There's stipulations attached to that, and one of the stipulations is that all riders 18 and under would ride for free, and the other stipulation in order to get the grant money is going to be that we cannot change the rate of tax that's being collected for the transit system. But I just want to note that even though these are grants, it's extremely large. But all that money comes from the taxpayer. The government doesn't pass out money that it doesn't first collect from our taxpayers. So just want to keep everyone aware of that, that even though that's a very large grant, it still is taxpayer money. And that concludes my update for last week. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, first on my update, I would like to make an announcement for next week's meeting on April 19th, 2022. Will be at 7 p.m. here in the Commissioner's Room at the courthouse. We are going to have a night meeting at 7 p.m. on April 19th here in the courthouse, which has been well requested by the public so they can attend, because during the work hours they cannot attend. Had a meeting with Steve, correct me if I'm wrong here, Keith, but it's Rinke?
Rinke.
Yes, with BCES. Then I had the Ben Franklin Entrance Conference for their audit. Franklin County Veterans Advisory Board meeting. Ben Franklin Operation and Maintenance, and we went over the same thing that Commissioner Mullen went over with Ben Franklin Transit. I too am received emails requesting that we do not lower the tax, but I've also received emails from citizens saying yes, it's time, where they see the buses running around, they see they're not fully loaded up with people, there's not 2 or 3 maybe in a bus, and they want it reduced. And I think it should go to the people, and that the board of directors are only allowing the people to speak for this taxation, and I believe that's the way it needs to go. So that meeting is coming up this Thursday, and it'll be, you can attend it, it'll be virtual, and I encourage people to be there to attend that and voice their opinion. And with that, we'll move down to public comment. Is there anybody in the room or anybody on the phone, Keith, for public comment?
No one on the phone at the moment, sir.
Anybody in the room for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on down to the next item on the agenda is Proclamation Public Service Recognition Week. Keith, are you going to cover that, or you want me to?
I think it's over by you, but
Okay. Well, this week is the celebration, the work of our public servants. And this is May 12th from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Giza Carousel of Dreams, 2901 South Ridge Boulevard, Kennewick. And what it'll be a recognition of all the servants, which are the elected officials, and we hope we're all servants, that we're serving the people of the community. Again, that'll be May 12th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Giza Carousel of Dreams. Okay, and with that, we'll move down to...
Commissioner, I
Go ahead.
apologize for the interruption, but there was a proclamation in the read-ahead material that I think we're requesting that the board approve that proclamation to recognize.
To recognize that? Oh, there it is. It's on the next page. Okay. So there is a proclamation for this recognition. We're just looking for a consent, or do we need to take a vote? Okay, the proclamation, May 9th through the 13th, 2022, as Public Service Recognition Week. Whereas public servants are an integral part of America's society, serving our citizens at every level from the local community support offices to the highest levels of the American government. And whereas public employees often commit themselves under oath to serve the needs of our citizens while maintaining the highest traditions and ideas of public service. And whereas many public servants forego public recognition and free market compensation for the privilege of serving others, and whereas many public servants risk their lives as part of their service. whether they protect our nation in the armed forces, served as first responders in emergencies, operate local assistance programs, or countless other services roles. And whereas Franklin County public servants provide a broad range of services, including public safety, justice programs, public health, road building and maintenance, property and economic development, and serve numerous other community needs, and whereas dedicated public servants at all levels are essential to protecting our freedoms as well as the effective delivery of services enjoyed in our representative republic. Thank you. And whereas it is fitting and proper that we recognize the contributions of our dedicated public servants at this time. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed, we, the duly elected Board of County Commissioners of Franklin County, Washington, encourage all citizens to recognize the accomplishments and contributions of public servants at all levels, and to observe the week of May 6th through the 12th, 2018 as Public Service Recognition Week. In witness whereof we have hereunto affixed our signatures and caused the official seal of Franklin County, State of Washington, to be affixed this 12th day of April 2022. And I am in agreement. Is there anybody else in agreement?
Mr. Chairman, of course I agree. I see that this document has 3 signature blocks. Mr. Johnson, is there a signature copy for us today, or do we do this later? Apparently, Commissioner Didier, you have the signature
Right
copy.
here. You want to see it?
Well, simply because it calls for signatures, I think we already have.
Commissioner Mullen, have you seen this? It was in my book.
I have not seen the proclamation, but I am in agreement with it. I can sign it later today.
Simple vote might be appropriate.
Simple vote? Well,
Chairman, move to approve board signatures indicating our consent and support of the Public Service Recognition Week proclamation just read into the record.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Okay, with that, we'll move down to the conversion of appraisal position to trainee. Eric and John.
Good morning, Commissioners. So this request on behalf of the assessor today is to convert one of his commercial and industrial appraiser positions to an appraiser trainee position. There's no requested addition of any positions to the budget, simply reclassifying one of his grade 17 positions to a grade 14 due to difficulty in recruitment to fill that position. And so he has, based on his recruiting efforts, applicants that would be qualified for the appraiser trainee position. And so this requested conversion will allow him to make a job offer and then begin the process of onboarding someone and training and developing that person in that appraiser trainee role. But happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions, commissioners?
So Eric, we've had conversations recently about the assessor's office, the number of positions that they need, the level, the grade, and pretty extensive discussion on that. I'm curious, is there not some mechanism or process by which the position can stay as currently graded, since the assessor has argued successfully that it needs to be at that grade? I recognize that the hiring market is tough now, but it may not be a year from now. Is there not a mechanism where the position can stay as graded and someone can be hired in on a lower level, maybe on some sort of a probationary measure or something, so as to affix an appropriate salary for the, let's call it trainee level, without changing the position? Because I envision it in a couple of years, as the person becomes more experienced, we'll be right back here changing this position again. Is there not a tool for us to do that?
I mean, so currently with the memorandum of agreement that was adopted on the consent agenda today, there's a mechanism for somebody in an appraiser trainee role will be after 12 months of service and meeting certain certification requirements would move to a residential appraiser role from the appraiser trainee role. But with regard to this commercial and industrial appraiser position, there's no mechanism within the collective bargaining agreement or county policy that somebody would advance to that position other than a normal job posting, promotion, hiring function. And so certainly the assessor, could promote, or could either promote an existing employee or certainly hire somebody into that role. But then there would be the question of their qualifications for the position that were posted, and certainly their ability to successfully fulfill those essential functions of the job.
So the requested action today, does it actually change the position?
It would convert it to an appraiser trainee position.
Right. And so when a qualified commercial industrial appraiser comes along that is available to be hired, how do you envision we're going to handle that then?
So at that time, if there was either a need for, like there would be for any other position or office in the county, if there was a need for an additional position, or someone called up the assessor and said, hey, I'm a commercial and industrial appraiser, are you hiring? Then a request would be made to add a position to the budget.
So then we'd be adding another position. We've already created this position. We've already been through the process of discussing how many appraisers the assessor needs. We've, I think, nearly doubled the size of the office in the last year or two. The assessor has told me that he's got the right number of positions, now has the right number of vehicles. I'm just looking at this and saying there ought to be a mechanism by which we can put a trainee into the commercial industrial position with some sort of a mechanism that recognizes that they're not yet fully qualified and that the pay is commensurate to that. But what I'm hearing you say is that by our own devices, our own agreements, we don't have a path to do that. Am I correct?
Yes, you are.
Okay. It's the usual inefficiency of our structure, but I understand the answer. Thank you.
So Eric, how long has this been out there?
So prior to 2-3 weeks back, when the positions were reclassified, this position when it was then called a real property appraiser 2, has been posted since the beginning of the year when the position was added to the budget. And so and it was at a grade 16 at the time. So we've been posting that position relatively consistently, various different places, and it's just been vacant that entire time. Haven't received any qualified applicants at that previous grade 16 level either.
No participation, no applicants have applied.
We've received plenty of applicants, but none that would be qualified at that level. Okay. And so this request from the assessor today allows him to get a person into that office at that appraiser trainee level, understanding that there's going to be some training and development that it's going to have to occur to get them to a place where they could, potentially put them on that path to filling the commercial and industrial appraiser need at, some point in the future.
And I see it's a savings for the county of $11,732.
That's correct, because it's currently a grade 17 going to
And how
14.
fast will this participant, if he comes into line with his activities of that distinction, can he get back up to a 17?
So there's no, it would take approval from the board to turn around, reclassify one of those positions or that applicant or that person from a 14 or a 15 up to a 17 in the future.
He'll just work his way
There's
up.
nothing. There's no automatic promotion or escalator language or anything. So.
And actually, as you pointed out, there is no path to get from that trainee position to that 17 commercial industrial because of the collective bargaining agreement language. So the answer is there is no way to do it unless things have changed in the last 3 minutes.
No, that's what I was saying. There's not. There is to the residential appraiser position, which is a grade 15. And so it's perhaps the assessor could better speak to what his goals are.
And I see that he's joined us. Thank you. I'd like to ask, when you essentially convert this grade 17 commercial industrial appraiser position to a trainee residential position, who's going to do the commercial and industrial appraisals?
Well, we have currently one commercial industrial appraiser plus our chief appraiser that are handling those duties, even though they're lacking in enough staff for it. The trainee position gets us the body to start training somebody. We also have currently an ag appraiser that could be looked at in the future for some commercial industrial for promotion at that time, should we bring it before the board. We have a residential appraiser that has some experience, several years' experience, that may be moving up into that position in the future. I don't anticipate any of that.
Excuse me, moving up into that position, into the commercial
more of
industrial?
a commercial industrial appraiser.
What's
or
your level
statistical.
what's your level of comfort with that? I mean, what's the
Not this year.
likelihood that
Not
that'll-
this year.
Not anytime soon?
No. So
Okay.
we literally are having to take people and bring them up. Just to get them to a residential from a trainee is at least a year.
Sure.
You're looking at up to 4 years to get them to a level to where you could move them into industrial, commercial, and we have people that do have some of that experience, and we're working on the training, but
Right.
they're not there yet.
Okay, well, to be clear, I'm not having a concern or an issue with your need for a commercial industrial appraiser. I'm not having an issue with the notion of bringing in somebody as a trainee, maybe saving the county some money and training them up in the county structure. I think that's all fine. I don't have any issue there. But it strikes me as a little odd, if we're going to bring somebody in as a trainee, why not bring somebody in as a trainee in the commercial industrial path? Or would a person coming in as a residential appraiser trainee,
The initial training.
barring the union complications,
The
would they
initial
be a
training
candidate?
would be the same.
It'd be the same?
The initial minimum of 2 years would be identical, same path.
Oh, okay, well, that's helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Identical path.
So thank you. And Commissioner Peck, I'd remind you that when another commissioner has the floor in questioning, please do not interrupt him. I was questioning Eric, and I was talking to Eric about this, and you jumped right in the middle of my conversation. So please, would you recognize the chair before you jump into the middle of questioning by a fellow commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, if you're going to insist on lecturing people about Robert's rules, point of order.
Point of order is taken. The
Good.
point of order was I had the
No, no.
floor questioning Eric, and please
Chairman,
do
I-
not jump in the middle of my conversation.
Mr. Chairman, I call for a point of order. You're obligated as a chair to hear it.
I have called for point of order, Commissioner Peck. You were out of order.
Now, clearly, you don't understand Robert's rules, even the basics.
Clearly, you don't understand Robert's
I
rules.
call for a point of order. I have the floor. Are you going to acknowledge that?
Yeah, go ahead,
Okay,
Commissioner
great.
Peck. You got the floor.
Under Robert's rules, there are a number of procedures that need to take place. The first is, it does not appear anywhere in the record that Franklin County has ever formally adopted Robert's Rules of Order. Somebody show me that document, please. Two, if we have and we're going to follow that, either by acclamation or by resolution, then the chair needs to understand what Robert's Rules require, starting with, you don't bring an agenda to a meeting, excuse me, and at the 11th hour of the meeting, change the agenda. You're obligated by Robert's Rules.
Commissioner Peck, you're out of order. We have not changed this agenda. Are you referring to another meeting because this is not on the agenda, Commissioner Peck?
Again, I have the floor.
This is not on the agenda.
I have the
And now
floor.
you are breaking your own rule.
Mr. Chairman, I have the floor. Robert's Rules requires that the first item of business be that the chair present a draft agenda. It is voted on and approved by the members to make it an official agenda. Until then, there is no legal agenda. So don't lecture me about Robert's Rules till you've read it.
We are going,
And that includes speaking to people who are before this board. Pass
All I've
Robert's
asked
Rules
you-
and follow it,
all I've
or
asked-
just live by the rules that we've adopted.
Commissioner Peck, all I've asked you is give the courtesy to the commissioner who has the floor questioning a client.
If I stepped on your words, I apologize. I
Thank
don't
you.
believe I did.
That was a tough one to get out of you, Commissioner Peck. Thank you.
Well, why don't you apologize for the little encounter with,
Commissioner Peck, we're going
in
to
the
move on.
hallway with,
We're gonna move on
with
with
the man
three.
who you alleged to be a plaintiff, and call for a formal
gonna-
investigation. You
Commissioner
want to go
Peck.
down this road?
Commissioner Peck.
I don't think you do.
Commissioner Peck, will you get yourself under control, please?
Oh, I'm fully under control.
So with
fully.
this, we're going to move on with this trainee position. Is there a motion? Is there a motion? Commissioner Mullen, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Is there a motion?
The motion to approve.
Yes, the appraisal position to a trainee.
Yes, I move to approve the position of trainee.
I second. Discussion.
Motion under consideration is Resolution 2022-081, and thank you to the assessor for the clarifications. I can support.
Thank you for the clarification. All in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. With that, we'll move down to the ER&R vehicle discussion. Matt Beaton.
I do have, is it possible to get the photos that I sent in to put up on the board? The photo that I submitted?
We need ARPA funds for this. It's pretty bad when you can't put the screen.
All right, while that's coming on, I can go ahead and get going. Find myself in an interesting position in my 12th year in office. And I'm going to start with, by the way, I do have a bit of a sore throat, so I may probably talk pretty slow, may use a cough drop or drink some water. I'm going to start off with judgment, influence, trust, and politics. I'm here today to request a vote to affirm and grant that I am entitled to the same indemnification that everyone under 2.04 that works for or serves in any capacity in this county. A code that is very common to all municipal corporations and facilitates the protection of everyone under that. Well, who am I? Well, I'm Matt Beaton. I'm the elected county auditor, and I started in 2011 with Mr. Sant. In fact, he and I still to this day value the drive we had and the information that we shared over to the newly elected in December of 2010. That's what makes today so difficult for me. But as auditor, I view my position as monitoring the internal actions and drawing attention to any kind of abuse, theft, anything that's out of the ordinary, so that people like the prosecuting attorney and the sheriff can do something about it. Folks, I'm just a voice. And the main characteristic should be a firm resolve to not be intimidated by people with their ability to use their judgment, influence, and the trust in that to silence my voice. So, with that in mind, today, aside from my request, I want to draw attention to how we got here. I'm going to lay it out over probably 4 events and 2 that are very personal to me. And I want everyone to understand this is all over a bill that the prosecuting attorney and the staff had to go out of their way and around processes to make sure that a $5,600 bill was sent to my home. And I will lay out how over time the things have changed, and they've resulted in what I'm going to say is the trust in Mr. Sant's judgment to orchestrate and manipulate the county to waste money, go around normal practices, and worse, manipulate the input and actions of normal people to get that bill in my mailbox and to put me here today. The big thing today is that we're a month away from filing week, and elected officials, it's always a big deal, try to draw this stuff out into the open. I'll tell you, over the years, there's really been three key events that I think from the initial where I worked, when I came into office, 10 years ago, folks, Public Works. Public Works, there was a person out there who was known to have prior problems, by all accounts, well-liked, given a lot of authority, and all I did was, when I came in, everybody knew about his prior status. All I did was implement, with my staff, a verification of vendors. So what that did was move us forward, and the then chairman, Mr. Peck, and Mr. Sant and I, quite frankly, worked very well together. One of the things that came out of that I want to draw attention to today was, I made a request, and by the way, they both fully supported, and they got it done. I made a request, and you'll see I've done this more than once with my voice, and that is, I made a request that an independent person come in from the outside, do an investigation so that the public would know the fox wasn't counting the chickens in the hen house. It's, as a person who, tries to stay acquainted with the outside, they just don't believe the government covers for government. So the only way to do it is independence, transparency, everybody knows it. And a lot of us practice it, Mr. Sant included at times. The independent report came out, and guess what? People in power did not like what was in it. Mr. Sant used his judgment, influence, and the trust in that to advise to that board to seal that report 10 years ago. It's still sealed. There's no reason it should be sealed. It shouldn't have been sealed then. And in fact, at that point in time, they asked me, would you like to read it? I said, no, I don't want to read it. I'll read it when the public can because I don't want to forget that it's there. I still wonder what's in it. I don't know what it was. I know that the judgment made, look at it was sealed.
Chairman, point of order.
There is a presentation taking
Doesn't matter,
place.
point of order.
You just said we don't have nothing on the record for Robert Rules of Order. What are you calling point of order for? There's no Robert Rules of Order in place, is what you told me.
Those are the rules you said you wanted to play by. Now, you don't want to play by them, fine, I'll just speak. If Robert's rules doesn't apply,
order!
Gentlemen, let me finish.
Order!
You just said there's no Robert's rules.
Matt Beaton.
The gentleman giving testimony is disparaging the prosecutor in a manner that's not...
Commissioner Peck.
Settle down.
You are out of order.
No, you just said
I am the chairman. You are out of order.
Do we have Robert's rules or not?
These are my words. We don't, because you said we don't, Commissioner Peck.
Okay,
there's nothing that's signed into place. And you're out of order. Let me present, please.
Gentlemen, you can't be out of order when there's no Robert's rules.
He is presenting.
Down.
He's presenting?
No.
Quiet.
He's giving political testimony against the prosecuting attorney that is not relevant to
you
his
are
case.
out of order.
This is ridiculous.
I am the chairman. You are out of order. I'm running the meeting. Quiet.
There's no Robert's rules.
Present.
Do we have Robert's rules or not?
Present.
Then point of order. Either we have it or we don't.
Commissioner Peck,
Either we have Robert's
you are trying
rules.
to talk out of both sides of your mouth, and you look foolish
I'm
right now.
asking you.
You're foolish.
Settle yourself down.
You are trying to be both the dictator of this room and the one that's running the meeting. No, you can't be, bud.
We have Robert's rules.
I'm the one with the $5,600 bill here.
Okay.
I'm the one with the $5,600
Yes,
bill.
please.
And I've been asked to pay it $50 a month at a time. It's absolutely ridiculous. I'd like the two of you to let me finish. These are my words. I know you don't like them. I need you to let me finish.
Don't tell me what I know.
Oh, my
Listen,
God.
If you want to stick to the subject,
you are trying to
that's fine.
disrupt this presentation. Stop it.
Hey.
Stop it.
Do we have Robert's rules or not? Yes or no?
Well, you said we didn't,
I'm
Commissioner
asking
Peck.
you.
I'm following your lead.
I'm asking... Well,
You said
great.
there's been nothing put into the record to follow Robert's Rules of Order.
And I'm asking you for
You've been
this
longer than
meeting.
me, so I'm trusting you,
For this
Commissioner
meeting,
Peck.
are we following
I'm
or
trusting
not?
you.
I am trying to
Mr.
lay out
Chairman,
why I have an
following
$66
that
bill
or
in my
not?
office.
Answer the
Continue,
question.
Matt. Continue, please.
Stick to the subject, don't disparage
Hey,
other electors.
Commissioner Peck, will you
Oh, sit
quiet
down.
down, please? He is presenting.
Do we have Robert's rules or
I am
not?
going to reiterate, it's my position that as the elected auditor, to monitor internal actions drawing attention to abuse and corruption and anything else where you try to silence me. I'm just a voice. I actually have a bill in my office that the PA and his staff are going to stand up here and tell you whatever they've done and why they think I owe it. And I think that after 12 years of sticking my neck out and doing this stuff, this deserves to be heard. And I know why it's happened. You've been here the whole time. In fact, there's some, I'm pretty sure that whatever's in that report, it's going to be nothing, just like the time card fraud was nothing, and that's coming as well. I'm going to move through this very quickly, because the next piece where I stood up, and this is where, despite my respect for Mr. Sant as a family man, a guy in the community, well thought of, internally, this is the problem. Other than that, marvelous man. Everybody I know likes him. I look at him and think, all I want to do is be able to be heard. And again, it's his judgment, his influence that makes the decisions in this courthouse. He and the sheriff have tremendous power, tremendous power. I'm a voice, and I want to be heard today because I'm the one that's at jeopardy of paying $5,600. Have you got the dent up there yet? I'd like the people to see the dent. It's ridiculous, it was manipulative, it was wrong. The tract land deal, the only reason I was involved in that was I have a background in real estate. And so I'm inside the walls, I ask questions. There was a situation where his judgment was used and he influenced the board. People trusted him, and guess what? It happened. My voice was, there was never a lawsuit, there was conflicts of interest, and that there was never an appraisal. And the reason this is still on my mind.
An appraisal is not required.
Good Lord, let me finish, it's my mind.
Stay on subject, Mr. Beaton.
I am, I've laid out my track here. So anyway, please don't, let me finish.
There's the picture. Please.
That's not it.
Scroll
Rotate
down
it, it's
one
the
more.
other one.
We're talking about a vehicle today, not land deals.
No, we are talking about why this was orchestrated so that I could be charged. You'll have to look really hard. The dent's below the taillight, in case you can't find it.
Can you zoom in on that? Because I really don't even see any.
But here's the deal. In the end, guys, I'm still at the county. The property behind the Hampton Inn has no reversionary clause because that was used, and the property hasn't sold. Again, it happened, it's still there, but after 10 years, why hasn't that property been developed or sold? Just an aside, again, that whole thing was orchestrated, and it sits there 10 years of the fastest growing market. They built a McDonald's in the hole next to Firestone. We haven't sold any of our property, and the property we sold to the gentleman out of Vancouver doesn't have a reversionary clause. It can sit there undeveloped forever. So now the one that really broke it and caused the last two, which has culminated with this $5,600, was the time card fraud. And I have to tell you, somebody internally, everyone knows about this, somebody internally wrote letters because they were concerned about some hours in the commissioner's office. I didn't know anything about it. I am pretty sure everyone involved but me thought I was somehow involved. I didn't know. But I did again have my voice. I suggested an outside investigation. Well, it turns out Mr. Sant relied on what was supposed to be a public works what was supposed to be the HR review of the situation and hired a private investigator, started searching for the letter writer, okay? It escalated, the letters kept coming. My only involvement, and this is where I first interacted with the sheriff, was I went to the PA and suggested he write a letter. Clearly people inside this courthouse know what everyone else inside this courthouse is doing. All you have to do is talk with them and listen to them. And every one of them know. So I wrote the letter that said, send all your stuff in. We are concerned. We will try to solve the problem. 2 weeks later, about 5 days later, a packet shows up with all the letters to me. And then the sheriff contacted me and I turned them all over. This went on and on. The sheriff, who relied on his advice, was forced to do whatever he had to do, subpoenas for phones, and it was totally disruptive. I'll get to the point.
I wish you would.
Thank you.
It's supposed to be about vehicles, not campaigning.
Yeah, I'm not campaigning.
Certainly
But in
sounds
the
like
end,
it.
Commissioner Peck, will you
But in the
please
end-
settle down? Be quiet, please. I'm asking you please to
Here's
keep
the most
quiet.
important piece, again, is that when the independent SAO report came back, and this board never officially covered it, they said in here, and I quote, I have it, it's a public record. We requested the county's investigation files to determine whether we agreed with the county's conclusions. The county could not provide us with documentation supporting the work it had performed. Now, this is after this document was wordsmithed with the SAO. And at the bottom, they said, yes, there was money missing. And I want to make sure you know, this amount was $1,400 over 60 days, and we cannot determine if it was misappropriated because of the lack of records and difference of policy. Folks, this was a time card problem. I'm not here to suggest that money was stolen. What I'm saying is someone was keeping loose hours, and through this process, we spent tens of thousands of dollars, investigation, involved the sheriff. In the end, they couldn't prove anything, and it was over a lousy time card problem. So, and this is where I'm telling you where the politics comes into these other three. And then you get, and all of the electeds in here know about the COLA issue that went for 3 years. And this board knows because they tried to solve it, and I interacted with the SAO on that issue. And on that one, in particular, Mr. Sant contacted the SAO, and then he impressed upon them, and this is my discussions with them, he actually visited with each of the electeds and told them what to do prior to having the board take action. When the board finally took action, one last hotline call came in, and everything they had told me as I tried to work with them to resolve the issue, folks, this was like $4,000, and we expended tens of thousands of dollars of legal hours talking about unconstitutional retro pay, a very same action that happened in 2013 from September back. These things, I tell you what, I'm in my 12th year, I've got a $5,600 bill, and that's why I'm bringing all this up, because this is as pure intimidation and politics as all it is. For the PA, prior to having an action for his client, as an officer of the court, to visit each and every elected, except for me, and tell them to pay back, 2 people did, because they trusted his judgment and his influence. 4 of them knew it was politics. And it wasn't until the very end when they said, this is ridiculous. You know what? When they finally said, look, your PA won't quit, I said, I know, just like my sheriff, in the end, the PA wins and so does the sheriff. But I got this microphone for about 2 more minutes. I hope it's only 2, because actually now I have to explain exactly what happened. That brings us to this $5,600 bill over that dent. That dent occurred in September on a rainy day when I was leaving this establishment. The truck was parked in an access way. It was parked. There was no one in it, okay? The bottom line was I hit it. I'm over 50. I hit it. I don't like it. It's embarrassing when you hit somebody's car. I immediately went in and talked to Ruben. We both went out and took pictures. I didn't want him to have to tell his boss it was his truck. He was the one that parked it in the access way. And so I called Curtis and told Curtis. Curtis then did what anybody would do. He likes his utility. This is a utility truck that I believe he picks up bodies in. He's got 2 of them. He then went out to Public Works, and this is where things left the track, and the opportunity to get beaten, basically, is what this feels like, came in. Because he was then, the Public Works staff erroneously directed him, and I don't know all the particular details on his side, because he and I just had some conversations, and he just wants to get his truck fixed. He was directed back to the PA's chief civil deputy. There was a discussion there, and there was some determination that he should, as the driver of the car, Ruben, an employee went out and got private sector bids for a county vehicle. And then somewhere in there, I spoke with with Deputy Johnson, and there was a discussion, and in that discussion, she basically told me I owed the money based on what we talked about, turn it into my insurance. And then she made some kind of a reference to Public Works, unless Public Works something. So I ended up thinking, you know, I need to go talk to Public Works and find out why this was handled like this. It doesn't seem right. So I go and talk to then the prior Public Works, Matt Mahoney. And in fact, you know, I can tell you right now, and I want to make this very clear to the commissioners, to Rocky on the phone, I was in the course and scope of my work. When she questioned me, it occurred on the property, and when the incident was over, I went home. And that was the answer I told her. And in the end, this whole thing turns on, where were you going? Well, in the course and scope, after that incident, I was shook up and I went home. But I want to affirm right now, I was within the course and scope of my work here. But when I went to Matt Mahoney, he laughed. He said, where'd the bids come from? I said, well, Curtis gave them to me. So he said, we don't do it that way. These are county vehicles. We have a process. We will determine what goes on these vehicles. So we had a discussion. I sent him some information. He said, this happens all the time. And in this process, folks, I have heard people have come out and told me, by the way, prosecuting attorney himself had a claim against the county to have his car repaired when a garage door, according to him, and I believe him, why wouldn't I? But his car was damaged by some mishap with a garage door. He had it fixed. The county paid for it. I've also heard of a story where a person driving a county vehicle hit their own car. This was in Facilities, I think, some time back. And the county repaired his own car when he hit with the truck. And these stories go on and on. But Mr. Mahoney assured me that it was covered. You don't have to worry about it. You are on county property. We don't like it, but when this happens, and then he said a couple things. By the way, we may not fix it, because if it's cosmetic, we don't always fix those, depends on how much it costs. And then he also said, it'll be up to us, and if we do fix it, we would likely do it in-house. And I said, look, I kind of have a loud mouth around here, and I say things that people don't want to hear. And so I need your assurance. Yes. And then he announced he was leaving. And I even called him one last time, because I was also working with him on putting ballot drop boxes that are required by the state. He assured me one last time, it's covered. Now, after my initial discussion with Jennifer Johnson, I never spoke with her again. After I got the bill, that's when I actually discovered the code. And everybody in this county needs to know, go look at the code, 2.04. It is actually well written. Everyone is covered with indemnification and legal defense if you're acting within the course and scope of all of your different jobs here at the county. You could be a volunteer and you're covered. You could do anything and you're covered if you're acting on behalf of the county. So then in March, I get this bill. And that's when I spoke with Mr. Erdman. I said, I believe it was sent in error. And I said, Matt Mahoney, I had these conversations with him despite what was typed on the bills after he had left, the bills generated. And so I then spoke with Mr. Johnson, and I said, I asked him to try to do something about it. I said, this is ridiculous, wanted to prevent today and what's going on here. And so in my conversation with Mr. Erdman, he basically said, yeah, we can't do it. I asked him on the phone, and he told me at that time, I said, did you see it? No, he didn't actually see it. I looked at the bill. The bill that was included, I included the two. You guys has two different amounts. Didn't make sense. So I visited Ajax, the people who fixed the car. Went and talked with them yesterday. Asked them for their bill. And I asked them about how it came about. Well, back in September, Ruben had gone in, as he was directed by the county to do, to get these three bids. And I don't know how that one was selected. I don't know who selected it. I'm sure we'll hear after I'm done talking. But they told me that the car was then dropped off in early January by Mr. Curtis McGarry, and picked up by him in February. And that at that time, he did not take any paperwork with him. That was all just mailed to the county. And apparently the county even added some kind of a VIG on top of this bill. And so what I'm here to say is I wanted to draw attention to how much of a diversion this is and how much of an abuse of the trust, how disappointing it is to me, because it's generally just directed at me. And so, and when I talked to Mr. Mahoney, when I was able to reach him, because it puts people in a hard position. When I'm directed by the legal to go talk to Public Works tells me when the good people of this county are allowed to work and not influenced for political purposes, and of course, not political, they'll maintain legal judgment purposes, but when they're influenced, it affects them. And so, at this point, I had a conversation with him. He made 2 comments to me. Probably shouldn't have been fixed, and it was not, what they're doing is not right. Won't take my calls anymore. So I know what I heard. I know that this county, in its official capacity, advised me that everything was fine. And then now here we are today, and I'm looking at a $5,600 bill. So I either want this board to make the determination that I am covered by 2.04 for indemnification, which means we would just manage this internally, like has been done numerous times, numerous occasions. I don't even know how, I'm not even interested in looking into Mr. Sant's claim when his car was repaired, or any of the other ones. I just know that this occurred in the employee parking lot. The car was parked in an access way, and so there's joint and several. My letter describes all of it. And so if you do not want to indemnify me, I'm asking for private legal defense if the attempt to recover this is going to be pressed. Thank you.
Okay. Now, discussion.
Mr. Chairman, can I have an opportunity to address the board?
Mr. Sant, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, first, there's an awful lot on the discussion that I was not prepared for. My family just returned from being on a family vacation and got home at 3:30 this morning. I saw this was on the agenda, had not received a previous copy of it. So I've read and I've reviewed the claims that are made here. And for one, I don't understand where a lot of this animus is coming from. This is in no way personal. I'll reserve other comments later to address the other issues that have been raised to disparage me. But I think it would be important, since this was raised on addressing the ER&R funds, I didn't know if Curtis McGarry wanted to address it since it's his vehicle. I think that would be important to address and have him have the opportunity to provide his information, and then I'd like to provide a summary, because a lot of information I think has been misstated regarding the interactions between my office, the duty of my office, and how this claim was handled. So I would like to follow up and summarize that after we hear from the coroner, since it's his vehicle.
It's important to note that the vehicle is managed by the Public Works Director, and Matt Mahoney. That's why to draw Mr. McGarry in would be like having the sheriff have his individual drivers of his police cars have to come in, or the sheriff himself to have to manage his fleet. That's part of what I'm trying to draw attention to here. Is this is very unusual.
Okay.
Of course he cares.
Let's let Mr. McGarry have his say.
So, as we move on with this, there's accusations that the sheriff and the sheriff's office conducted an investigation at the behest of the prosecutor or anybody else, and that's just absolutely not true. I conducted and directed a cyber harassment investigation. I can give you all the case number, and you all can make a public disclosure request, and you can find out exactly what took place and what we looked into, to include search warrants that were signed by a Superior Court judge.
Of course.
Right. Not by anybody else. And
Of course.
I understand your frustration, but at the same time, that was a criminal investigation, and when it was completed, it was handed over to the prosecutor. The prosecutor makes the final review and decision. And unfortunately, whatever your feelings are about, well, that's tough.
Not really.
I read a criminal investigation.
Absolutely you did.
And it's right there in its public record, and it's the way it is. This part, I'm trying to figure out if I'm listening to a hit and run that's taking place, or is it something else?
As part of
I
your...
would suggest that if you're any of those accusations are occurring, that you refer it to the sheriff's office and we will investigate it as a hit and run, and then we'll go from there.
A hit and run would mean he'd leave the premises, and I believe he went and seeked out the driver of the vehicle. That's
Yes,
not a
listen-
hit and run, Sheriff.
Let me point out two things. Let me point out two things. As part of that cyber investigation, I was interrogated at the direction of the sheriff as, and asking me who I thought did it and all these questions. That'll be part of it. It'll be in there. And and the sheriff, as well as the county administrator, is fully aware that I am not the sheriff's favorite person. And the reason is he doesn't want to turn in receipts for his meals. And in fact, there was a room full of people. So I'm just trying to tell you that, again, it's just in my normal course of my job and apparently my marvelous personality that has people, I don't even know why he's at the mic, quite frankly.
Let's stay on the vehicle. Mr. McGarry.
Thank you. So, on the day that it was stated it did happen, Matt did call me, told me that he was at fault.
I backed into it. I didn't say I was at fault. Go ahead, God. This sounds like it's been coached. Go ahead.
This hasn't been coached at all, Matt.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. McGarry.
I don't understand why he made the statement that he did. He says, I was driving a Ford and I hit a Ford. What that had to do with anything, I don't know, Matt. He told me, and this is quote, go get some bids and turn them into me.
That is absolutely BS. That is unreal, Curtis.
Matt, my deputy will even testify to that.
He wasn't there.
Please, let Mr. Curtis finish.
Yes, let me finish.
Talk about this is interesting.
And he told me to go get a quote from Nolan's Collision, even.
No, that was after you said you were told from Public Works to get quotes.
And I have it here. So that's what Matt had told me.
Why would I don't manage the vehicle.
I'm speaking. Let me finish. He told me to do that. I talked to Public Works because, yes, it is their vehicle. Greg at Public Works told me the same thing, go get some quotes. That's who I talked with, was Greg. That's who I always talk to about my vehicles. I agree. That's a little dent. The tail light is cracked some. The bumper, they said, was damaged, which I didn't think it was. And I told them we don't need to replace the bumper, it's fine. The quote, Matt had mentioned that Public Works would do it in-house. Well, that truck is all aluminum. No one there is trained to do aluminum. And I talked to him about, can you just fix it? It's a little dent, pop it back out. They cannot because it's aluminum. That whole side panel had to be replaced, which to me it's ridiculous. I don't recall talking to the PA's office. I remember them talking to me first about Matt's claim that he was not at fault and that I was parked in a non-designated parking area. Matt told me that is not a parking area. If you go out there and look, it looks just like where he parks his vehicle. There's nothing marked there as a no parking zone. So I don't know where he's coming off on that. Public Works told me not to worry about it, that they would take care of it. I had sent the bids to Matt, and he never got back. Public Works called me up one day and said, okay, take them to Ajax because that's who we do our work with. That's who we have our repairs done with. And that's just exactly what I did with the truck. We were without that truck for about 5 weeks. So that's the things I have to say. There's other things in that record here that Matt has written that I don't totally agree with, but that's Matt's opinion.
Mr. Chairman.
So, just a minute.
Questions.
Okay, questions. So did you ask the Public Works Department to leave it alone, that it's okay? Did you make that comment to him?
I told him, I said, whatever you guys want to do with it, it's your truck.
Okay.
I was
But you were
fine-
willing to live with it the
I
way it
was
was?
fine living
Yeah.
with it. And they told me, that's a brand-new truck, we want to fix it. So, it's not my vehicle to say yay or nay with. It was operational, I could still open my doors.
And is there a difference between metal and aluminum as far as Blue Moon body putty?
Yes.
It won't stick to
They
aluminum?
told us and we asked that to the other places we went to. And I asked them when we were up here at Ajax, and they said, yeah, aluminum, you can't bond it. It doesn't attach. And they can't just pull that out either, like with metal they could, so.
Well, neither one of us are experts, so I'd have to rely on your,
Yeah, I would talk to the auto body shops.
if you were willing to live with it, I don't know why we went to the trouble of fixing it, because I've been out to Public Works and I've seen some of those pickups and
Well, and that's,
quite a few dents in them.
I just assumed that it wasn't going to get fixed because it had gone on for so
It's
long.
not gonna hurt
that-
your ability to go do what your
Okay.
job is, so.
Yeah,
I'm questioning why we went to this extreme when you were willing to live with it.
I
Okay,
was told to do it.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to,
Mr. Beaton.
I'd like to address some of it. First thing I'll point out is, on the bill prepared, sent to me by Public Works, under instructions, there are 3 instructions. Coroner requested repair of collision damage. Number 2, Ajax repaired the vehicle. And number 3, this is what was so upsetting for me, was they also asserted that I was being billed at Mr. Mahoney, the departed Public Works Director's behest. This is what I'm talking about on judgment, influence, trust, and politics. The fact that the coroner and myself have to be the ones up here representing, there is a process in place. Both Mr. Mahoney and Mr. Erdman told me we do not have operators handling it. And when I spoke with Ajax, the coroner himself delivered the car and picked it up. Both of these facts are, raise questions about what he's asserting if he was willing to live with the. And by the way, I like the coroner, and I've interacted with him, we have on a lot of instances. This occurred in September. We are trying to, during COVID, we are literally trying to recollect something, and that's why this whole thing is a little bit like, quite frankly, the arguing that goes on in here. It is dysfunctional, it is wrong, and it is disruptive to the people of this county and the people in this building that suffer through it. And so those 2 things right there, I believe what he says. He's standing here saying it. I'm saying that this right here contradicts it. It's
So
in
you
writing.
said Mr. Mahoney signed off on it.
No, I didn't say that. It was what was typed right here. I didn't know. That's why I tried so hard to get a hold of him and had one last conversation with him, because I wondered if I was losing my mind.
What date did Mr. Mahoney leave Franklin County?
I don't know. 31st, maybe? I don't know.
January 3rd was his last day.
And what date did you pick up this vehicle?
It was delivered on January 10th and picked up on February 10th.
Yeah, it was February.
So how did Mr. Mahoney, he was gone?
Greg told me when we first went out for bid, because this went out for bid, and then they said, don't drop the vehicle off until we get the parts. Because of COVID, everything's taking so long to get the parts here. And so it was 3-4 weeks or more before we even dropped it off. And then Ajax called and said, bring it in. Greg told me at the shop that Matt Mahoney told him to go ahead and get it fixed. And then Matt Mahoney would send the bill and settle up with Matt Beaton. That's what I was told. The reason I dropped it off was because I was told that's what we're going to do with the vehicle.
Mr. Chairman.
Point of order, this is Commissioner Mullen.
Commissioner Mullen, go ahead.
So, listening to everything and doing some checking on it on myself, myself, I think we can all agree it was an accident. It happened on the courthouse property. The auditor was in course of fulfilling his obligation as an elected. Whose fault is questionable. So I don't believe it's completely the auditor's fault, as the vehicle didn't appear to be parked. But regardless of that, I believe the auditor was working in good faith and in the course of fulfilling his county duties. I believe that the proper procedure may have not been followed correctly. My assumption would be maybe for political reasons, I don't know. But I do believe that the auditor is indemnified, and the cost of further litigate and provide legal counsel for both parties will be far more than the damages that are being asked for today. And I also realize that this affects the ER&R fund. It will raise the rates for everybody that's renting vehicles. It is my recommendation that we pay the bill out of the fund, the general fund, and we move forward, because I believe in the end it was an accident, and accidents happen, and I do believe that the auditor was working, fulfilling his duty as an elected official, and in my opinion, it's indemnified.
So Commissioner Nolan, are you making a motion?
Conclusion, if we need to, I'd like to make a motion that we just, we pay the bill out of the general fund and we move forward.
There's been a motion to pay the bill out of the general fund. Is that the proper fund to pull this out of? Or do we have the risk pool fund that we should?
Mr. Chairman, discussion's out of order.
I'm asking a question.
It's out of order. There's a motion.
There's been a motion. I second the motion.
Discussion.
Commissioner Peck, will you please hold your tongue so that I can conduct the meeting?
You seconded. Don't you know Robert's rules?
Yeah, God, you keep referring to Robert's rules, but you said we don't apply to them.
Well, I'm trying to get the chair to affirm if we do or don't. Do we follow them or not?
Order.
Oh, settle down.
Order.
You love that thing, don't you?
Order. Okay.
Makes you feel important.
Question, Keith. Is the proper fund the general, or is it our risk pool?
I think the general fund could legally pay for that, but I think also the ER&R fund could pay for it. It's a county vehicle. That's what the ER&R fund is set up for, to pay for repairs to county vehicles. But if the will of the board is to allocate funds from the general fund, that could be done as well. There is a constitutional restriction about one fund benefiting another, but if you're talking about the general fund paying for what would otherwise be a claim against the county, then I think it would be appropriate and defensible to pay for it.
I think we need to hear from the prosecutor. There's still people that have information to
Commissioner
share,
Peck,
and you're trying to
would
drive
you
a
please
decision.
recognize the chair if you're going to speak?
Until you tell me we're using Robert's rules, I'm not going to.
We're running the meeting as we have ran them every meeting before, Commissioner
Okay, so if
Peck.
we're using Robert's rules,
Why are you
then
trying to disrupt this meeting so terribly bad?
because you are not
Because
following Robert's
you are
rules.
just trying to disrupt it and disrupt this meeting. Will you please quit?
You're out of order again.
Commissioner Peck.
So there's a motion.
You're
There's a
acting
second.
foolishly
I'm
in this
asking for
meeting.
discussion. I've asked
We are
twice
in the
now.
middle of discussion, and I had a discussion going with Keith.
The chair
and you're
does not
interrupting the
speak first
discussion I
on
had
your
going
motion.
with Keith.
The chair doesn't speak till the other board members have. My
Keith.
God, you don't even
Keith.
know the simple basics. I'd like to
Do we
hear
need
from the
to
prosecutor.
withdraw?
There are other informations that need
Keith,
to be
do
brought
you
forward.
withdraw this motion and change it to ER&R?
I don't know that it's required, but that's an option. I might.
Commissioner Mullen, are you comfortable with the general fund as your motion?
I think that it needs to come out of the general fund, but that's my opinion. I think that if it comes out of the ER&R fund, it's going to raise the rates for all rentals. And I think it may come into question if we were to get audited. So it's my understanding that it should probably come out of the general fund, but I'm willing to listen to anybody else that has further discussion. But in the end, I think this was an accident. I don't think anyone is 100% at fault, and I think that in the best interest of the county that we move forward. I believe that Mr. Beaton was indemnified. He was in the course of his duties. This is a very unique situation, but I think we need to put it to rest and move forward. So, yes, if anybody has further discussion, I'm more than willing to, I'd like to hear them, but we need to move forward. Thank you.
Is there further discussion?
I think it's important that each and every person that has germane information to provide to this discussion is provided opportunity to do so, and to try and drive a motion ahead of that is improper. So I thank Commissioner Mullen for his interest in hearing everybody out, and I think you'll find that there are some additional pieces of information that really change the context here. So thank you.
Are you going to reveal those you got this information? You want to reveal it, Commissioner Peck? Sounds like you've already got it all dialed up.
I'm not even going to respond to that juvenile,
You made that statement.
remark.
You made that statement. There's more information that'll.
Well, there is.
What is it?
We have a legal counsel for
I
the
thought you
boards.
knew it. The way you spoke, you knew it. So, Mr. Sant, go ahead.
Thank you. Despite the personal attacks against my integrity, I'd like to focus just on the issue at hand, which is before the board's business. I could address the others later. The first issue is indemnification. Any elected official is entitled to indemnification when they are acting in the performance and course of their duties. When a person has finished the workday, the IRS has established certain requirements too for reimbursement for travel, and for the same reasons that we don't receive reimbursement for commuting, going to work, leaving work. It was the information that was provided. And just so it's very clear, I've had no discussions with the coroner. I've had no discussions with anybody about this. This was something that was tried to handle at a much early level, frankly, a low-level thing, because, frankly, the information that came about is that, hey, we have a county vehicle that was struck in the parking lot. Okay, let's figure that out. Through the course of that investigation with my chief civil deputy, who, as risk manager for the county, tries to inquire, talk to Matt Beaton. I haven't talked to Matt Beaton. I wasn't involved in this case at all. I haven't talked to Public Works Director. I haven't talked to the coroner's office. I haven't tried to manipulate, as has been accused that I'm trying to do. I'm simply trying to keep the county and protect the public's interest, protect the state constitution, which does not allow the gifting of public funds. Whether the coroner said, hey, this is no problem, no damage, no. It's not his vehicle, as he said. It's the county's vehicle. It's the people's money. And we all know what happens when these vehicles reach their useful life. They have to turn around and resell it. And if they let this go unfixed, unrepaired, it causes further rusting or other issues, and that depreciates the vehicle more quickly. And it's the people's money at play. The biggest issue and concern here is that trying to suggest that driving home after the end of a workday is somehow equivalent to performing the duties and responsibilities of office. If anybody got called out, if my chief deputy gets called out and she has to go to work, then there's a potential that, hey, under L&I, certain activities would be covered. When one is leaving the county courthouse, which if that's their designated place of work and they're driving home, we're not responsible as the county entity. We're not responsible for covering damage that that person intentionally or accidentally gets involved to with their vehicle, their own vehicle. The whole issue here is this is a public vehicle that was damaged. And one of the things that we tried to do to protect the person that was at play, and you know, the funny thing is no one has made this a big public hurrah. This was all tried to be done, handled behind closed doors, in a fair and transparent manner, which is not broadcasting that, hey, there's some kind of wrongdoing here. This is being handled because, hey, there's damage here. Let's present the person that caused the damage with 3 different estimates so they realize that any estimate from Public Works is not being inappropriate. And eventually, once that gets done, then it will come to the board, be presented with recommendations. And as you heard, the information here is that this Public Works vehicle could not be repaired within the Public Works because they don't have the skill set or expertise to repair that vehicle. So what do? They want to make sure that they're also protecting the public money. They look at other estimates to make sure that any one estimate, if it's Ajax, which is the primary vehicle repair shop, they want to make sure that we're protecting the people's money and that the adjustments or the recommendations, the estimates, they're all in line. That's what was done here. So the real question that I posed to the board before we decide to just simply, let's go ahead and just cover this, what you're basically saying is that any employee, let's take away the location issue from not being at the courthouse. Let's say that the individual drives to Walmart on the way home, backs up and hits a vehicle, and then they claim, hey, I was on the way home from work. I was working at the courthouse, had a rough day, the visibility was bad. I saw a vehicle as I was backing up, didn't think I'd hit it, but I did. We don't cover those kind of circumstances either. So I guess what we're looking at is we're looking at a situation that occurred in the county courthouse in the parking lot. So whether it's in the general parking lot in front of the courthouse building and this backing happened into a private vehicle, certainly we just don't write it off and everybody goes their own way and we cover the bill when someone's driving home. That's the same process that was done right here.
Okay.
And so, I want to oppose to the board because the information that was provided is acknowledgement by Mr. Beaton that he doesn't claim 100% responsibility. He claims he's not the only one at fault here. Because of, for whatever reason, the tightness, the tight quarters of the parking lot, if the offer here is to split this thing 50-50, then we could go ahead and we could have a meeting of the minds and say, look, that's probably in the county's best interest to say, look, let's not spend any more money on this. If that's what this is about, he should have approached that with the county and say, look, I'll cover 50. I'm not going to cover the whole thing because I think because of the tight parking or whatever. We could then have that discussion, but that's a whole different issue. So I don't know if that's what's being proposed by Mr. Beaton, but that would be certainly something I would think we could all find a recommendation for, is say, hey, if we want to meet this 50-50 and just make it easy that, hey, vehicles are tight, we have limited space here in the courthouse. If that's what he's offering to do, I would probably suggest to the board that we consider that, because that's something that legally we can do that to resolve a dispute before the county. And we could protect the taxpayers' money further by not going forward with the litigation. But the concern I have is when the board starts talking about indemnification and what constitutes an actual duty. If a person is going home at the end of the day, and that's where Mr. Beaton had said he was going. He said that he was done with the work and he was heading home. That's
not true.
That's the information that was provided to my civil chief. I didn't gather any of this information. I wasn't involved. I'm relying upon others. And so if that's the case, then I would suggest to the board, go ahead and consider a resolution. Split the cost if that seems to be a fair deal. There was 3 estimates, to my knowledge, from what I had heard about this case, trying to read up on it this morning. It sounded to me like 3 estimates were gathered to make sure that we were not overcharging any of the involved parties and that we're protecting the county taxpayer interest. That's our job.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Sant?
Mr. Sant, I understand the indemnification issue, and to put it in context, had this identical scenario taken place, and let's take Mr. Beaton out of it, it's not about him. This example is, let's say a county employee or elected official, doesn't matter, is in that same parking lot, is backing their private vehicle, they've finished their work for the day, they're going home, and instead of hitting a car, they back over an individual and they kill him. Indemnification is indemnification is indemnification. It doesn't really hinge on whether it's a $5,000 vehicle damage or somebody being run over. Now again, this has nothing to do with Mr. Beaton. This is just a hypothetical to illustrate that the issue of indemnification is not really centered on the amount of money, it's centered on the law and if and when responsibility for the county applies.
That's correct. That's the biggest concern in the question is.
And precedent.
The indemnification, as with all decisions that are made by this board, it carries somewhat of a precedential value. In other words, you're creating a practice of how an expectation will take place in the future for similarly situated employees. And so for this to indemnify is suggesting somehow that, hey, this person is working on the job. And let's just put it as an example. Let's say we have many of the folks in the auditor's office work with the elections. They traveled back and forth between here and the annex. There would be some argument that the travels between the courthouse and the annex, which is another workstation, between workstations, that would be something that would be covered. That's a different scenario. My understanding is that Mr. Beaton was questioned about where he was going. Was he done for the day? He said he was going home. I'm taking that at the information that I received, and if that was the case, then one, leaving the workspace to go home is not a covered event. Otherwise, just like for any other employee, whether you're a salaried employee or other, one would be able to make a claim then that, hey, on my way home from the county, I got an offender bender in a parking lot or other private property or whatnot, I'd like the county to cover. And so we don't cover. Just because you are a county official, county employee, that doesn't mean that indemnification goes. I assume that Mr. Beaton did not intentionally hit this vehicle, or this would be a different conversation. I think what has been termed is correct, that this was simply an accident. Reading the statement solely from Mr. Beaton, because I've had no knowledge about this. I haven't previously talked with Coroner McGarry or others that may have witnessed this event in the parking lot, but I'm taking it from what Mr. Beaton had written, that he was backing up, he saw the vehicle, or he knew the vehicle was there, but did not think he was going to hit it. And so I think there's a reasonable interpretation there that maybe it's because of our congestive parking lot area. The board could certainly agree to try to resolve it, but typically when a person is leaving home, we don't indemnify and we don't cover the expenses that that person would provide. And I think there was attempts to gather, I'm not aware of Mr. Beaton's insurance being, but that is the usual practice. It was brought up earlier somehow that this was treated any different, and that's usually what would happen is when a private individual acting in the capacity here of not official county employment, but when they're in a personal vehicle and they cause damage to one of our county vehicles, we would typically try to obtain the insurance information. We let the insurance companies reach out to us. They try to resolve this, and this just goes away like that.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Mullen, just a minute, Mr. Beaton. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions?
I just want to make the statement that none of us know exactly where Mr. Beaton was headed to. He's an elected official. I'm sure he takes phone calls all hours of the day and night, the same as all the electeds do. If he was at the courthouse, he was obviously fulfilling his duties as auditor. I don't believe that when he steps off the county parking lot that is very congestive and tight quarters, that he's immediately off work. We don't know that. I mean, it's a touchy situation because I'm sure he doesn't work 8 to 5. And we don't know if he was headed to the election center or the annex. I believe it was an accident. I don't believe he was 100% at fault. I think the other vehicle didn't look like to me it was parked properly. It is very tight quarters, and accidents happen. And, he's not an employee. He's not someone that works 8 to 5 and clocks out. All electeds will tell you that they're basically on the clock 24 hours a day almost. I mean, people call all hours of the day. There's always meetings at night. I think he's covered. That's my thoughts.
Okay, so Mr. Sant, I've got some questions.
Yes.
That was a statement. That wasn't a question. That was a statement.
That's fine.
So please keep your answers short on my questions. Number one, you said rust. Does aluminum rust?
Yes.
No, it does not.
Well,
It'll oxidize, but it will not rust. There's no rust. Number two, you said you want this open and transparent, but yet you wanted it done behind closed doors. How is that open and transparent?
Okay.
You said you were hoping you could settle this behind closed doors.
No.
That's not open and transparent. Number three, is he an elected official? No, those are statements. Those are statements. Now my question. Is Matt Beaton an elected official?
Well, if you don't know that, then I guess we...
Is he an elected official? Can elected officials get a car from the...
Yes, they can.
Does Matt have a car?
I don't know.
He's driving his own rig. He doesn't have a car.
Okay.
Does he then get covered under the county with his own car?
For what?
For an accident on the courthouse grounds.
Well, you have to look at each case on an independent...
We are. We're looking at this, and was he on the courthouse grounds?
Well...
Yes or no question. Was he on the courthouse grounds?
Yeah, I think everybody knows
Okay,
he's on the courthouse
good.
grounds.
And he's an elected. He could have a car from the county if he so choose, or he could put in for reimbursement. I asked Matt Beaton, have you put in for an automobile from the county, or have you ever put in for reimbursement from the county for travel?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you, yes or no question.
Yeah, I have not filed for local travel in 12 years. So I drive my car in my official capacity and scope on behalf of my commitment as an elected official.
That's all the questions I got.
So as asking questions, I should be allowed to respond a little bit. So the first question that I'd ask the county commissioners to do, since we've talked about RCWs in process, was there an incident form completed, as all county employees are required to do? If there's a fender bender or if there's some damage to county property, typically a person will write out information. They will identify witnesses that have or hold information about that incident, so that way it can be forwarded to the county administrator for review or to our risk manager. I don't know if that was completed in this case where a full statement would have been previously. The only statement I've seen is what was provided as the materials. I think it was 12 pages submitted today. That was the first time I had seen anything about this case today, because this was primarily handled by my chief civil deputy. I just want to also clarify, when I said behind closed doors, meaning I don't come into the commissioner meeting and say, Mr. Beaton had a boo-boo in the parking lot. Let's publicly humiliate him for the accident. We resolve those kind of disputes behind closed doors, not publicly advertising until the issue is resolved. And then if there's a decision by the board to pay out money or make a decision, we come to the board, we present to the board, and then a public discussion is had.
Then don't use the words open and transparent in that statement. Because it's behind closed doors. That's not open and transparent.
Well, when I say open and transparent, I intend that I don't come in here and broadcast all the faults. And if I can go back, a lot of the other issues that were raised, we tried to address the issue with the COLA pay. Again, individually with the elected officials that were affected, try to get that resolved without making a big public outcry of it, because we thought, hey, once we provide information to them that, hey, this is a violation of the state constitution, as the state auditor's office found it was, then you guys could resolve it. You could do the right thing. We don't have to make a big debacle of it. It was only when it was brought to the board's attention, and then again, members of this board accused me of trying to make some kind of personal vendetta over trying to follow the state constitution, and that's where I take offense.
Do we have a limit on this for time? Because in 2013, we went clear back from September to pay.
And what were the exact particulars of that?
I wasn't in office.
Well, the board had never made a resolution that says effective on this date, we go forward, and then go back contrary to what that resolution is.
I just hope we're not opening up a can of worms here.
No, you're not, because the board has authorized, when there's ongoing negotiations of collective bargaining agreements, the prior court precedence has been to allow, when ongoing union contracts are being discussed, we don't want employees walking off the job because there's no contract. We can ratify and agree to that.
Let's stay on the vehicle.
You all brought it up.
No, you brought it up. I just questioned you on it. So, Mr. Beaton.
So I could be personally attacked and not be given an opportunity to defend.
No, you brought it up.
We had a discussion on vehicles on the agenda, and you brought up all this litany, how somehow the prosecuting attorney is somehow have a personal vendetta against you, the auditor, and every other elected official here, and that's just absurd. If I'm going to be accused of anything, it's following the state constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and if you guys don't want to follow that or do that, that's on you.
Believe me, we're following it.
It took the state auditor's office to come in and point out that what my direction and guidance was correct.
We're following the state constitution.
I wish you would.
Well, we are.
I wish you would.
And I wish you would when you represent the commissioners. So, we got Matt Beaton would like to speak.
Again, like I said, judgment, influence, trust in politics. Facts are stubborn things. I was on county property. I was acting in my capacity and scope. This is political theater. To conflate facts and talk about a bunch of hidden bodies and Walmart, it clouds something that is very easy and clear to see. And that is that, yes, I did write up a statement, and I provided it to Mr. Mahoney, who in fact told me, don't worry, you're covered. And then the influence that comes in and the level of, this is for everybody to see. This isn't a personal attack. This is me in my official capacity having to ask questions that people don't like or disagree with me on. And guess what? In the end, he carries more weight than I do, as is evidenced in every one of those situations that I brought up. I am either covered, as every person is, my election staff who leaves here. I mean, if they're not covered when they leave the parking lot, or it's subjective on a case-by-case basis. Mr. Mahoney told me that I was the first person to ever be billed. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't had a chance to say it, but this whole process is a one-of-a-kind process, unless you guys can produce something where it happens with this manner, where you literally have, Mr. Mahoney was very clear, and I believe Mr. Erdman would probably tell you the same thing, that the ER&R is managed by Public Works, and they oversee the operation and decisions on those vehicles. Absolutely, they take input and advice from the people who operate them. But that, in fact, this whole system was co-opted. The fact that he's up here talking about stuff that it happened in the parking lot. And there's been many representations. My words have been misrepresented. I believe they believe their words have been misrepresented. It's because it's been 5 months. There was a delay. I mean, Mr. Mahoney left office and left the courthouse. So I just would hope you guys would just vote it up or down, and let's move on.
Sheriff?
For the record, the case number is 18-09784.
This is the case number
Sits in the
of,
sheriff's office under cyber harassment. All the facts are in there, to include search warrants and every other piece.
what's the number on that again?
18-09784.
Okay, thank you.
I've been in law enforcement for 40 years. I've had lots of people make veiled accusations that I'm corrupt, but I'm standing here to tell you I'm not. It's sitting there in that case number.
Thank you.
All right?
Anybody wants to look that up, feel free. Ms. Johnson?
I just wanted to clarify one piece of this information that I think is relevant to this discussion. I first heard about this case when Mr. Beaton called me. We started discussing the incident and how he didn't look and see the car and he backed into it, etc. We started discussing, the RCW and why it may or may not apply in this particular case. He told me he discussed it with his wife, who is an attorney, and that he did not want to submit it to his insurance. And then he asked, would it make a difference if I was working at the time this happened? And I said, yes, absolutely. Were you working? And he said, I would like to say yes, but to be honest, I was not. I was leaving for the day, which is why we didn't go down the whole indemnification route. I've been before you guys enough times discussing indemnification of employees that I am the first person to suggest we indemnify our employees if they do this damage or they get into any trouble or lawsuits during the scope of their employment. In fact, we've got one on later today. I would not have a problem at all if he had told me he was going to the elections center and this happened. I would say instantly, you're indemnified, we will work it out amongst ourselves and get this paid. It's not a problem. But he told me he wasn't. And at that time got upset because the estimates were really high and the damage in his opinion was small. And I admit I've looked at the damage and it was small, but apparently it's expensive with aluminum. At that point, I said, if you're not happy with those estimates, maybe you can contact Public Works. Perhaps they can do it in shop and maybe it'll be cheaper. And I think that's kind of where we left that conversation. I later had a conversation with Curtis explaining to him that I'd suggested going to the shop to see if we could get a cheaper quote. That was my only involvement in this case. A few weeks later, Mr. Beaton called me again, asked me if I'd had time to look at where the cars were parked and whether or not I still thought it was his fault. I told him at that time he still has a duty to look and not back into things, and I did think it was his fault. But I also said it's ultimately up to the commissioners to decide whether or not we want to go after this claim. That was probably October. I hadn't heard anything on this case, hadn't discussed it with anyone, hadn't heard a peep until Public Works called me about the final bill a couple weeks ago and asked me where to send it. Know if they were sending it to the auditor's office to pay. And I said, in my opinion, it's personal damage caused by an employee after work, so it wouldn't be a bill for the county to pay. But that Mr. Beaton, once he receives the bill, is more than welcome to come address it with the board. I said, I'm fine accepting payments if that's ultimately how, if you want to find him, have him committed this and accept payments, that's fine. We just need to get those payments in before the statute of limitations runs. That's my involvement in this. Nothing in this is political. It would have been the same for any other employee after work that causes damage. And I think it's a slippery slope and a very dangerous one to consider anybody on salary that could potentially be called 24/7 to be still under the guise of Franklin County and its insurance coverage. Because I'm on duty 24/7. So that means on my Friday off, I'm getting phone calls. If I get in an accident, I'm going to name you guys. And you guys are going to have to indemnify me because that's what the suggestion is here today. And I think that's incredibly dangerous. It opens up the county for extreme liability on any salaried employee that leaves the place of business. We're not covered by L&I once we leave the place of business. We're not getting any tax perks or being taxed for going home. The only exception I can think of is if you're assigned to a patrol car and you're on the clock until you hit your driveway. Those people are going to be covered once they leave Franklin County. So that's where we're at. I don't care if you find that it was 100% not Mr. Beaton's fault, and we pay it, but I do have a problem claiming that he was on duty after the fact and indemnifying him for it. That's where I think we're setting a horrible precedent that's going to come haunt us for many, many years to come. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Beaton.
this is my final word on this. The way some of these conversations are being recollected after 5 months, I disagree with. I remember those facts differently. But what I do know is the conversations that are had on the public mic, on the video, are always different than what really goes on in the organization. And I spoke with Mr. Johnson when I tried to head this off, and in those conversations, people talk about who they talk with and what they know. And that's why there's always the backstory. There are members, one of the things I wanted to have happen was to have things properly marked in the parking lot. There are hardworking directors and people in this county who know that some of what's being said is slightly off. Now, whether it's intentional or because of time, but when the prosecuting attorney's office has actually told people not to talk to me. Now, they have been influencing this process all along, and their recollections, I am going to say, and the trust placed in me, I was still on the grounds. When I struck the car, I was leaving the building. I was leaving work at the time. What that means is I left my desk. It was raining. I did not see the car. It was parked. In fact, it was parked in an access way. It was not all the way in. It was carelessly parked. But it was stationary. I get all that. But the fact is that there's been these misrepresentations this side of the mic, and there's a lot of people that know what's going on the back side of the mic. I would just like to close this matter out. It has been a huge distraction. It's what I'm talking about on the politics end of judgment, influence, trust, and politics. This is just like the other 4 things I mentioned. So please, let's just move on, make your vote. And if, like I said, I think it's very clear, if you talk to most people, they will be stunned that they're not covered at work while they're working.
Mr. Chairman, move to amend the motion on the table with the following change: a 50-50 cost share between Mr. Beaton and Franklin County, with funds to be paid out of ER&R for the express purpose of resolving this dispute and avoiding additional cost and inconvenience to the county and the people.
There's been amendment to the motion. Is there a second? There's been an amendment to the motion. Is there a second? Hearing Hearing no second, the amendment dies. There is a motion on the floor to pay this out of the general fund. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay, it's paid out of the wrong fund.
Thank you. We'll move on down to the election boundaries discussion. Mr. Beeden.
So unfortunately, this particular discussion involves exactly the same thing that we just covered. But I will stick to what this is. We all know that the county has to adjust its boundaries from time to time. All districts do. There are RCWs that govern the process. These are the laws that govern the process. Therein, I have a redistricting guide. They're all 29A. These are the RCWs. The auditor's office is really, we're administrative. And it is important to know that per the RCW that governs this process, the districts are supposed to furnish to the auditor. I'll read from it. The legislative authority of each county and each city, town, and special purpose district which lies within the county shall provide the county auditor accurate information describing its geographical boundaries and the boundaries of its director, council, and commissioner districts. And they shall ensure the information provided to the auditor is current. So over the years, in a county like Franklin County and the hardworking people in it and the way that the resources are dispersed, I think people have lost sight of the legal guidance for where this actually lies. Now, last week I was not in the meeting, but I understand that this county had to vote to pass a resolution because it was inferred that a voice vote is binding. Well, absolutely a voice vote is binding. It's always binding, but you can't govern with it. And if you don't understand the laws, you can't advise your client to do it either. Now, I brought with me 2 examples of other districts, the PUD and the city. They have very detailed resolutions that include all of the information to meet the letter of the law. And the descriptors of this law, the notes down below, descriptions of the district should be in meets, bounds, a list of precincts, or in census blocks. If the jurisdiction lies entirely within a county, the jurisdiction must provide the county auditor with accurate information describing its boundaries. There is overlapping laws that make the management of the electeds or of the districts the responsibility of each city, of each town, of every district. It doesn't matter. And in these cases, like take for instance, one of the model ones is the PUD. Their lawyer advised them to pass a resolution with definitive information. Now, I realized there was a voice vote, and I'm going to tell you again, Mr. Sant came into my office after visiting the GIS, and he asked what was going on, and I said to him, if GIS doesn't know, I don't know. You're going to have to go talk to Keith, because the district has to present the information that we can use that's actionable. There's nobody in the world that wants us making the legals or any of it. You hand it to us after it's all been vetted on your end. Everybody else does it. Everybody else does it. But over the years, there's been some kind of a misunderstanding where this board actually had to vote. I mean, you can't govern without the documents. I mean, even what I got to tell you today, after I'm done here, you're going to have to vote. If it's just a map, that's not enough. It doesn't say just give them a map. It says meets, bounds, precincts. If you look at this one, and by the way, my recollection is Franklin County used to do this. It is a list of each district and the precincts that you want in it. It also has a map to help. The city of Pasco and their attorney led them in theirs, they listed off in the ordinance that they passed. District 3, voting district, it's comprised of XYZ. The reason, and I need to bring this up because we will be coming back, our elections have gotten so complicated and overwhelming. The district only is much harder to manage and to make, I worked with Prosecutor Sant on an incident that happened in Fire 3 where trying to manage this data, a district was included that, and a person ran in one that wasn't eligible. And we had to sort out how to manage that properly, and we did. And so I'm just trying to bring up that read the RCWs. Your legal advice needs to tell you 29A 76020 governs the responsibilities of every district. Franklin County and the commissioners are a district that then interacts with us. And you're supposed to consult with us. We want to help everybody get it right. And the staff that I have has been exemplary in doing this. But when they come to us and act like we've dropped the ball, when in fact we listen to the meetings, but it's ridiculous to think that what am I going to listen to the PUD meeting and it's a voice vote and they don't send the process anything? So, I mean, that's why I wanted to talk today is even on the map, I don't know how when you had a voice vote, how do you confirm to the people after this many months that what you voice voted, because it was just an image. And that's, that's for you guys to figure out. And once the information comes into us, we really don't manipulate it. We don't worry about it. We put it in. If there's a problem, we go back to you and we tell you, hey, there was a problem. You guys need to correct this. And then you give it back to us. We are administrative. That's why all I have is a voice. And that's it. So that's the update I wanted to give, because what I understood from last week was you would have attempted. So I want to summarize on this. The board would work with GIS and whoever they get their legals from. Because I'm not even sure, I think these other counties, these other districts work with, I don't know who to get their legals. Some of them provide legals, some of them provide, a lot of them just try to work with the precincts because then they don't have to pay the cost and you just move precincts around. Every 10 years, they cut through lines when they're doing new districts. And it's a very tedious process to try to get those things down and handle them appropriately.
So before we go on with this, I would like to call an executive session with the three commissioners, the administrator, the clerk of the board, Sean, Jennifer, and John. And I'm calling it under RCW 42.30.110, parentheses 1, parentheses I's, litigation. So at this time, I would like to call this executive session before we say too much and discuss this, and then we'll come out and discuss it in open public.
Mr. Chairman, before we go into executive session, I don't want to assume that Mr. Beaton's schedule is going to allow him to be available after that executive session, so I'd just like to get a little clarification. I think you raised some interesting points for sure. The voice vote that was taken on January 11th that didn't include the precinct details you described, is it your view, and I know you're not an attorney, I'm just asking for your opinion as an auditor, is it your view that that vote violated 29A 76020?
I have no opinion on that.
Okay.
So what I can tell you is I can't implement a voice vote. That's really all I was trying to say is there's two pieces. Whether it's binding, that's the PA's and his staff's interpretation. I'm trying to tell you that by example of others, you can't, of course, I mean, the sense is a vote is binding, so that's, I know that much. 2 to 1 is binding. But what you can't do is it's part of a whole, it's only half of the solution. The solution is the elections can't implement it. So you can't govern with a voice vote. That's what I'm trying to say.
Inadequate for you to be able to do your function.
I will leave
Without
it to
the
him.
precinct details, you can't do your function.
That's it.
Right, so,
Thank
okay.
you. Yeah, that's for sure.
So at this time, I think 15 minutes would be appropriate. I'd like to go and, Matt, you're remaining.
Do you-
You're here, Mr. Rosenoff's here, and we got the two attorneys. 15 minutes. So we're going in 10:55. We'll be coming out at 11:10.
Same people, same person.
Extend 10 minutes. We come out of executive session where you extend for 10 minutes. We'll be out at 11:21. Same people involved. Same executive order.
So is there a resolution with these
We've come out of executive session. We're going to take a 5-minute recess to reach our time limit for the executive session. Okay, we've come back from recess and we are out of executive session. We are back into regular session, and at this point in time, we are, I believe, establishing commissioners' districts with Franklin County.
I believe you have a resolution.
And there's a resolution.
Well, on the prior matter before you get to that.
There's a resolution on the prior matter? Election boundaries discussed?
Correct.
Yes. So with that, is there a motion?
For the election boundaries discussion.
This one, there's no resolution.
Resolution 2022-082?
This was already
Okay, I'm sorry.
So it is a commissioner districts resolution
Yes, we're done with that.
for the map on the commissioner districts?
Move to approve Resolution 2022-082 as presented.
Commissioner Mullen, are you there?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-082. Is there any discussion?
The vote that was taken on January 11th was a voice vote. This is an affirmation of that in writing so that various departments will have an actual physical document they can refer to. And my understanding is that there's nothing associated with this resolution that is in any way, even in the smallest detail, different than the voice vote on January 11th. They are identical matters. This merely puts it in writing.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-082. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, with that, we'll move down to public comment. Is there anybody on the phone, Keith? Is there anybody for public comment?
No one on the phone.
No one on the phone.
Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners.
If you are the leading hope.
There was a report that was spoken of earlier, sealed approximately 10 years ago by the county commissioners at that time, that has been referenced today, and I've heard it referenced numerous other times. I don't know what the contents of it, and I think that in the spirit of transparency, that it might be appropriate to unseal that to allow the public to have access to what the contents of that are, and allow for scrutiny of that 10 years after the conditions of that were sealed. Thank you.
You have one caller now.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, we'll take the caller.
Good morning, Wanda.
Yes.
You have the floor for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to speak on a few things that happened in this meeting today. Robert's Rules of Order. All we hear from Commissioner Peck is how we have to follow it until he doesn't want to. Chairman Didier was making a point of order, actually, until Commissioner Peck interrupted his point of order to make his own point of order, and it was his Chairman Didier's duty to try to get order in the room. And I have never seen such unprofessionalism as I have seen today from Commissioner Peck, literally mocking the chair as if Peck was a 5-year-old. It was embarrassing. Come on. That's not how we run our meetings. I was so disappointed. And it dawned on me as I'm listening to all of this why Auditor Beaton felt the need to bring all this out into the open publicly. And I'm not going to say, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I don't call people names, and I'm not going to say that Commissioner Peck is a psychopath. I'm not a psychiatrist, but it sure appeared that way today to me. A person who's a psychopath always has to have a fall guy, and they use them to get others on their so-called teams. They're manipulative, they're dishonest, and although their egos appear large, they're actually quite fragile and insecure. So to keep people, they always have to identify and attack one person, which it appears to me that today it is the county auditor. They use people that are weak in character by feeding their egos and making bad guys. Auditor Beaton is not a bad guy. He is a good man. But there has been a lot of game playing and manipulating. This is what I have felt. One, our auditor had not left the property. That makes him at work, period. Aluminum doesn't rust. I was glad that Commissioner Didier made that point because that's what I was saying. What do you mean it doesn't rust? Our coroner is a very great, kind, and professional man. I was so impressed with him today. And our sheriff, when he was asked to investigate cyberbullying, was only doing his job. What I'm wondering is why no one was asked to investigate the so-called cheat. Did you know that I received a letter? Nobody seemed interested in that from someone about this person. I'm just a private citizen, but because I was coming to the meeting, I guess they felt they'd send me an anonymous letter. But I don't know of anyone. I heard that she was just quietly let go, so I don't know of anyone that investigated the time card cheat. I can tell you this, is that unfortunately there's been many games being played, and there's a lot of innocent bystanders and a lot of good people that are just trying to do their job, and it's pitting people against each other, and the games have got to stop. They've got to stop now. It doesn't make any of you look better, and it just only makes the person who is instigating this look worse. So please, get it together. If you need counseling, get it. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm going to tell you what it sure appeared to be. Thank you.
Anybody else on the phone? Public comment?
George Dockstutter, Self Landing Road. I've got several comments. One, Matt Beaton was up here talking about a half a dozen different conspiracies and crap that had nothing to do with the $5,000 claim for an automobile. He should have just stuck to the subject. And as far as that subject goes, I think you guys just set an ugly precedent for paying people's claims. If I come in here and pay my taxes, I'm doing county business, and if I back up and hit a county car, then you guys are going to have to pay for it. You're not going to ask me for my insurance card because I'm going to tell you, hell no, I was doing county business. Matt Beaton should have called his insurance company and paid the damn bill instead of you guys soaking me for another $5,000 to satisfy something that he's obligated to pay. It was his fault. He admitted it. Where in the hell's his insurance company? And the other thing I gotta say, I'd like to see a little bit more civility amongst all the members on this board. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone? Okay, with that, we'll move down to administration office business. Mr. Johnson.
Just mention, it's already been brought up that next Tuesday will be a night meeting here in this chamber at 7 p.m.
Okay. And with that, we have an executive session. Keith?
Yes, we're requesting a executive session for up to 30 minutes under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph I, potential litigation. Ask that members of the board, myself, the clerk, and the sheriff and legal counsel be allowed to participate.
And for how long?
Up to 30 minutes.
Okay, we have come out of executive session. We're back in regular session. Is there any other business for the good of the county? And Keith, do we need to make any action on that last executive session? No. Okay. Hearing no business for the good of the county, this meeting is adjourned.